reconvened to hear the FY2015 budget request of the Guam Police Department. Mr. Sergeant Arms, would you please swear in the witnesses? Please.
Anybody else testifying? Can you please stand and raise your right hand? Will there be anybody else testifying?
Just myself and...
Under penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear that what you say in today's public hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and you guys will affirm?
I do.
Thank you. We only have one item on today's agenda, and that's the Guam Police Department. I think, just as a preliminary matter, Chief, the governor has submitted a budget, the executive budget. Does that satisfy the needs of the Guam Police Department, or do you wish to make any amendments today that we should hear?
Thank you, Senator, for giving me an opportunity. Senator B.J. Cruz, Vice Speaker, and fellow senators, good afternoon. And thank you for affording me the opportunity to come down here to testify for the Guam Police Department's budget. First of all, in answer to your question, the increase of over $5 million for FY2015 from the FY2014 with a total of $35,402,780 is an appropriate amount of revenues, a budget for the Guam Police Department. But I just want to add something, you know, and this isn't anything. It's not related to the budget, but it bears in mind the importance of because a lot of the majority of the expenses of this budget will go toward personnel costs. Recently, about 2 days ago, there were 3 police officers and 2 civilian police reserve officers who were patrolling. Who were patrolling together, and these 3 police officers and 2 police reserve officers responded to a situation 2 days ago involving a depressed individual who wanted to attempt to commit suicide. It satisfactorily resulted in the prevention of a death. And no one can place a value dollar on police officers, both civilian reserves and police full-time officers that work in our department. And that sets the context that I believe I'd like to thank the governor for supporting us, and in collaboration with the legislature, always working with our department, especially you, Vice Speaker, that we're at this point and now in being comfortable with the increase that we have with this FY2015 budget.
So I like the use of the word appropriate.
Yeah.
Does it satisfy the needs of the Guam Police Department?
Yes, it satisfies the needs of the police department, Vice Speaker.
And so at today's hearing, is it your testimony that you're not going to be requesting any additional amounts than what is in the governor's budget?
It's in my testimony today that I am satisfied with the request for $35,402,780, the budget request from the governor's office, and to get our department moving forward for the fiscal year 2015. I always want to qualify that anything can happen within the fiscal year, you know, in the 12 months of a fiscal year for FY2015. There's always a possibility toward the middle part of FY15 or towards the ending part toward 15 that we might have to evaluate and look at some expenses or costs.
We had a committee of the whole hearing about 2 months ago on Senator McCready's effort to address overtime. At that time, if my recollection serves me right, the testimony was that as of the date of that hearing, Guam Police Department had accrued $1.2 million worth of overtime for FY14. And it was anticipated that by September the 30th, 2014, the Guam Police Department would accrue an additional $800,000 for a grand total of $2 million worth of overtime for FY14. Is my recollection correct?
I believe yes, but one thing that's important, because it's not the end of the fiscal year, and right now, these are just estimates now, before the end of this fiscal year, about what the full total of overtime expenditures would be before the ending of FY14. And although those are large figures in terms of overtime expenditures and estimates of overtime expenditures, I want to assure you that I'm working with BB Marr and the finance team at the governor's office to ensure that we address, because again, the governor has always supported for all of our officers, our full-time officers, and including our civilian employees who work beyond the hours, to ensure that they're compensated for the overtime that they work.
At that same hearing, I attempted to amend the proposal to add the $2 million. It was my impression that you did not believe that it was necessary to do that at that time.
Well, I think if I can recollect that, I think one of the things I'm always concerned about is that anytime there's any amendments or legislation to add in a authorization to expend revenues for overtime, that it's backed up with a funding source and it doesn't compromise other cash flows within the government. And those are the kind of things that, in the conversations that I have with the financial team up there in Adelaide.
But you're still running up overtime in spite of the fact that you didn't have the money for the overtime, right?
Yes, there's some overtimes that are encumbered right now, but again, I said it's balanced also with some of the kind of ways that we mitigate it by some cost reductions, or mitigating it by augmenting some of our police force with volunteer reserves. And
to pay for the 2013 overtime, it was necessary to have a bill introduced by Senator McCready to initially we authorized it, I believe, and then we were told we had to come back in and appropriate it. Are we going to need to authorize and or reappropriate $2 million to pay for the overtime for this fiscal year?
Well, I can't predict, again, because it's not the end of the fiscal year. And I think when we talk about in the context of the FY13 appropriations for what we call past debt obligations, that the flexibility was needed, I believe, in allowing the governor to have that option and the flexibility to pay the overtime debt and not have any restrictions to that. So there's flexibilities to move that.
How much do you have, or did the governor provide you in this budget for overtime?
We have an increase of about $300,000, and
for a grand total of what?
$958,385
for overtime.
For overtime for FY 2015.
And if on October the 2nd or 3rd, you decide that you're going to pay the prior year obligation for overtime for 2014, is the $900,000 that we're going to be authorizing and appropriating in the governor's budget that you say is satisfactory, is that going to be sufficient to pay the $2 million that you anticipate will be accrued by September the 30th?
Well, the overtime amount that is budgeted for FY 2015 is budgeted. I'm satisfied with this as an overtime amount that covered for FY 2015. But if you're adding in any prior debt obligation of 2014, naturally, of course, I like to say, Senator, that there's continuation of communications with the finance team, BB Marr, in addressing that overtime debt. And it isn't, again, as I said, it isn't the end of the FY 2014.
I understand, but are we going to need to meet again as a legislature to address this $2 million, because we've only appropriated $900,000 for overtime?
Well, I certainly encourage that the legislature, continuing their collaboration with the Office of the Governor and the Finance team as we work to look at what those
We're
exact
here
numbers
in
would
the-
be in
we're
FY2014.
here in the public hearing
Yes.
for your budget,
Yeah.
and I'm asking you, actually, I sent you a FOIA request in April, didn't I? A FOIA request asking for your optimal budget. Your response to me was there's no such thing, but that I asked you during the hearing on Senator McCready's bill, you were satisfied that there's no need for an increase. Should you not be asking today for a $2 million increase to your overtime budget for next year so that there will be no need for this legislature to convene in October or November or October the 28th? I'm sure somebody is going to figure that it's going to need to get the attention of the electorate the week before the election, and will convene the legislature in a special session to just address police overtime because the budget did not properly accommodate for it.
Well, Senator, if you're asking me, should we increase our FY 2015 budget for overtime at $958,000 and add in $2 million to $958,000? Again, I would say I'm satisfied with the $950,000. I think the Guam Police Department's budget for overtime, just in that object category, has been increased by over $300,000.
And if I make the budget for next year so restrictive that you can only expend money as appropriated in the budget, you cannot transfer funds within object categories at GPD. You cannot transfer money into GPD from Public Works bus operations or wherever else it has been done over the past years to make up that difference. You're going to be satisfied, and you're going to tell those men and women behind you that they're going to have to just eat their overtime because you're satisfied with the $958,000 that the governor has has set forth in this budget, and you're not going to, at this time, in spite of the directors sitting behind us, that you're not going to ask for a $2 million increase.
Vice Speaker, in the context of the flexibility, the move funds, in the event there's a shortfall of overtime in this object category, I'm asking you that we do need that flexibility, because how do we handle some of those shortfalls?
Why don't you just ask for $2.9 million in overtime so that it's very clear? You can pay for your prior year obligation on October the 2nd. You'll have authorization for it. I admit it's going to throw off the governor's recommendation to you.
Again, Vice Speaker Cruz, I think that there's ongoing communications we're having with the finance team to look at these two issues separately, and looking at the FY 2014 overtime expenditures, and the FY 2014 fiscal year hasn't ended yet, and so we're just.
But we already know when we met in June, Ovi testified that as of that date, you've run up $1.2 million worth of overtime. Is that correct, ma'am? And that was in June. We didn't need to wait for the end of the fiscal year. In June, you were over $1.2 million. We had to appropriate $600,000, almost $700,000 to cover 13. I mean, I appreciate your loyalty, but I'm trying to get you to just say, I need $2 million and increase the amount that the governor provided to me, because otherwise I'm going to get to October the 2nd and I'm not going to be able to pay their overtime that they've accumulated over the prior year, because there's only $900,000. I'll give you one last chance.
Well, Senator, Vice Speaker, as I said, about the flexibility of moving funds, that helps us in every fiscal year, should there be a shortfall of moving some salaries.
And will there be a shortfall?
Overtime. There's always, yes. Now, I'd say that with the 958,000, even though it's uncertain about how that FY 2015 would end, in my experience, there's always going to be a particular potential shortfall.
Why are you only asking for 958,000 when this year you're going to accumulate $2 million worth of overtime?
I think because with this figure, it's already, it gives us already the enough funding to cover what could be anticipated from the beginning of the fiscal year of FY 2015.
And it'll carry you all the way to the end of the fiscal year. Well, this year you're spending $2 million. And for next year, you're only asking for 958.
Well, by next year, we're going to have an increase of personnel added to our force. You know, we have about 42 positions, new positions, they're going to be added to the force. That may make a big difference in terms of overtime costs, Vice Speaker.
Okay, well then, maybe I should get you to testify today that as a result of the 42 new positions, that GPD is not going to run up more than $958,000 in overtime for FY15. Are you willing to testify to that today?
Senator, I can't make a prediction in any numbers, and these are estimates of what we could expend in overtime.
I understand
every fiscal year. It's not an impossibility to hold an absolute number in what we could expect, and every fiscal year is going to be different.
But your prior year experience. All right, let's do it this way. We're going to run $2 million for 2014 in overtime, right? Ovi?
That's an estimate.
We've already run one. What is it? Slide the mic over to Ovi, please.
Yeah.
How much so far have we run up in overtime?
We have an outstanding of 1.7 million.
One
Not paid yet.
1.7.
1.7.
And we have the month of August. Have we recorded the month of August in that yet?
No,
Did we record all of the month of July?
not all of July. What I've done was projected for the remaining 6.5 pay periods. We're looking at 613,000.
So even more than what we heard. And I'm hoping my colleagues on this side hear it. That we're now going to be getting to 2.3, if my abacus is right.
About 2.9.
2.9?
Well, we paid so far 636. If you really want to look at the whole FY 2014 overtime.
But just the ones that you
For
accrued during
outstanding,
the...
yes. It'd about be 2.3.
2.3.
Yes.
All right. How much in overtime did you run up for 2012?
Well, sorry, I didn't bring that number with me, Senator.
About how much? Was it more than 900,000?
Yes. I think it was close to about maybe 1.1 or 1.2, if I'm not mistaken.
In 2011, how much overtime did you run? More than 958,000?
I don't remember, I'm sorry. But yes, maybe more than $900,000.
Yet, you're having your director state that you're satisfied with 958,000 so that you can try to figure out how you're going to transfer money from other areas to make up for the shortfall, when I am giving you the opportunity at this point to say I need 2.3 million more.
It's understood, Senator, that we're indicating 958 only because we have to comply with the budget ceiling that we're given. So that's how we came up to 958,000. So if the budget ceiling is increased, then that will make a difference.
All right. And that's why I asked for the optimal budget. Regardless, I said, disregard what the director, BBMR, has sent you as your budget ceiling. How much are you going to need to address overtime? And it would seem to me that the appropriation that you need for 2015 is 2.3 to pay the outstanding for 2014. And you'll probably need almost 2 million, or even conservatively, even if the 42 officers come on, maybe only $1 million.
Yes.
But still, that would make it 3.3 that you need to have appropriated in this budget, so that you would have sufficient amounts to pay on a regular basis the men and women that put their lives on the line every day, as he described earlier, that it's a priceless effort that they make every single day. They saved a life that's priceless, and they didn't hurt themselves or hurt themselves. All right. Does any other member want to discuss with them the overtime issue? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask a very pointed question, and forgive me if it's a little too pointed, but I want to ask, why aren't you fighting for your police officers? Why are you containing yourself to a budget ceiling and not fighting for your police officers? They're owed that $2 million for overtime. Is that $2 million, which is going to be a prior year obligation, is that even included in this budget?
Senator, I've always been fighting for the police officer. I worked in this police department for over 28 years.
So what changed?
And nothing has changed. The governor and the lieutenant governor, this administration has fought and supported the police officers. We've given police officers pay raises, and part of those pay raises sometimes up the overtime rates. But we managed to pay, working in collaborative with certain senators in the legislature, to pay the FY2013 overtime. The administration's committed to paying every single cent that is owed in any overtime.
So where is that
police
commitment?
Officers who've retired.
Where is
from
that
the
commitment
department
reflected in this budget? It's easy to state it for the record. Where is it reflected in the numbers? We're talking about money. Where is that commitment in the money?
Well, you separate the two issues, Senator.
No, it's one issue. It's commitment for the police officers. Where's the money?
With the FY2015 budget that's been set, I believe, as I answered, I'm comfortable and satisfied with the 900,000 figure for FY2015 and for FY2014. The ASO OV now testified she's projecting, but a projection and estimates how we end the fiscal year is going to be different, and we rather want to get exact absolute numbers, working with the finance team to get those exact numbers of what we'll end up in the fiscal year. But we'll still be committed to paying off any overtime owed in FY2014, and that's fighting for.
How are you going to do that when it's not in your budget?
We have that flexibility. I believe the finance team is working, and with collaboration from the legislature, I'm sure, as we work with in resolving the FY 2013.
So you have no idea how you're going to pay for it in this budget?
Well, this is FY2015, and we're looking at projecting what FY2015 is going to look like.
But you're not including the FY 2014 overtime prior year obligations in this budget.
Well, we're busy right now continuing discussions with the finance team and looking at the issue of FY2014 so that we can get the exact numbers. And it isn't, the FY2014 isn't closed yet with the ending of the fiscal year.
And so this is what causes us so many budget problems when we say, oh, we're going to figure out the flexibility. I don't know if you understand budgeting or not, but when you budget for how much you're going to need to spend, you can't just all of a sudden have these costs creep up and say we're going to figure it out later. If we already know we owe that for FY 2014, it needs to be budgeted somewhere. And as nice as it is to state that, I trust and flexibility and I have the commitment, but in the end, when we need to pay something, we need to make sure we budget for it. And so all that trust and all those words are great, but it needs to be budgeted for. And if it's not included in the police department's budget to pay for the prior year overtime, then where's that money going to come from? And we're going to figure that out in this budget. And that's why the questions are very pointed, and that's why they're being asked right now.
Yeah.
So you don't know where it's going to come from.
No, I'll tell you how we've been handling FY2014 budget shortfalls.
No, talk about the overtime.
For overtime, we've had the authorization in moving monies around, and there's the amount of flexibility in not constraining the governor from not paying past due overtime debt obligations. That helps give the opportunity for the flexibility to handle some of those budget shortfalls that happened since I've been in the department.
So that's been working so well. What's our balance right now?
The balance of the FY 2014? Can you get it?
Which
14.
balance are you asking?
The overtime balance.
Overtime? Remaining. We are zero.
You don't owe any overtime for 2014.
We owe overtime for 2014.
So what's the balance on that?
Like the information that I just gave a vice speaker, we owe for about 1.7. Actually, 2.3 if you're going to project it to September 30.
That's right. So we owe 1.7. So all that authorization and balance and flexibility still is leaving a $1.7 million overtime hole for our police officers. So it's not working in 2014. And that's why I'm asking these questions. Because in the 2015 budget, this is going forward now. This isn't even including the prior year. You're budgeting only $958,000 as was brought up by the chair. But when I dig through the digest here, and I look at the breakdown of the budget based on chief of police, police commander, all the different divisions within GPD, it's all zero in overtime. So where is that $958,000 allocated to?
There's a budget digest strictly just for overtime, and it's probably further in the back of the budget.
Can you tell me where? Because I poured through almost all this thing and everybody, and I'll go through names. I mean, basically, let me talk about some of them, because I'm just kind of shocked here. Special Operations Division, PO Officer 1, Mendiola has zero budgeted for his overtime. Does that mean he's not going to be able to allow to accrue any? And
Yes.
going down through all the different officers here in the Special Operations Division, there's zero budgeted here for overtime on their digest.
It's all into one, and it's like I said, it has a digest by itself.
Where's that at?
If I may?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to try and find out where you're at, but you said it's right after support division on a subsection overtime. Is that before federal programs? Tourist attraction fund.
Yeah, before federal programs.
Police services
Right before
fund.
fuel.
Fuel. Overtime. Here we go. Overtime. So we got $950,000 here for overtime. And it's just a big chunk of money.
Correct. It's 10%. We're allowed a maximum of 10% according to the budget preparation, allowed 10% of our budget salaries or our total salaries. So I came up to that. But the reason why it's that amount, it could have been more to 10%, but right now it's at a lower percent because I have to meet operations, utilities.
Sure.
So it came down to that. Again, meeting the budget ceiling.
So if every single division here has zero in overtime, but you have one special accounting here for overtime that's just a lump sum, does that mean you're going to pick and choose who gets overtime and who doesn't?
No.
Okay, so how are you going to spread $958,000 among $2 million worth of past due overtime and projected $1+ million in 2015 overtime?
This is for overtime incurred for 2015.
Yeah, this is for FY15. Now, how will we be able to pay off the FY 2014? 1.6, was it 1.6?
If the budget
What we do is we're working with the governor's finance team to look at the FY14 overtime, and it isn't the end of to get the exact figures and deal with that debt. But this figure here, for FY15. The flexibility, as I had said, that Vice Speaker had mentioned, are giving us the opportunity to move funds around should we run into a budget
That's a great line, Chief. But it didn't work because we had to meet 2 months ago to appropriate, right? If it worked, we would not have needed it.
Well, FY13, we're talking about that FY budget year is every FY year is going to be different. FY15, again, I can't give a projection of FY15 because FY15 is a new year and
I understand.
There's a lot of economic activity.
Even your own
has
digest
changed from
showed that in
FY15.
FY13 you had prior year 1.6 million. You only asked for 648, and so you were $1 million short on the 2nd of October for overtime, and you're running up 2.3. But you still, now 2 of us have asked. Will you ask for the additional $3 million to pay for the overtime so that I don't have to have a frantic letter from one of the senators saying we need to pay the overtime of the police officers, this $2.3 million owed, and it's October the 29th, and election is on Tuesday, so Friday afternoon we're going to have to meet to pass this bill, and if you don't pass the bill for 2.3 million that day, we can go out to the police officers and say, they don't care about you.
For FY 2014, of course, I've had requests and working with the finance team to ensure that we pay off every single dime owed on overtime for 2014. The governor is supportive of that, to pay off everything on FY 2014. And again, I'll ask if we run into shortfalls on FY15, I'll ask to work with the finance team to ensure that we cover any shortfall that may occur on FY15, but it's still not absolute what could happen in FY 2015. They're 2 different fiscal years. I still have some.
Well, Senator McCready, since he's championed their overtimes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. Oh boy, I'm going to take a different approach here. I look out in the audience behind you, and I see hundreds of years of experience from the Guam Police Department. I see a lot of tired faces that are telling me that I can retire at any time and not deal with this. But then we risk we risk losing that institutional knowledge that we sorely need in the Guam Police Department. So I would like to just address a few questions before I touch on this. A colleague asked that you don't support your officers. Why is there a perception of that?
I have no idea where Senator Mike Sinical is coming from, that I don't support the officers each and every single day since
Let's
I'm just asking.
let's
Since
stay
every
with the
single day.
overtime, all right?
Okay. It's just a question. That I
Just
want
move
more
on and let's just get
clarification.
on
I
the
work with
overtime.
each and
More
every single one of
clarification.
these officers. I work with a lot of officers. I was a supervisor. I was grounded in this department, and I fought for everything that we could do to move the department forward. And I think we're succeeding. We're successful, and I think we've increased our reserve program. We've increased our police force with reemployment and hiring, and everyone knows. The majority of the police officers and men and women of the Guam Police Department, I believe if they were to step up to here, they would tell me, Chief, you have supported our department with all the challenges that we face and all the kind of resources needs. You've done your best, and I think we're successful in it. And thank the governor, and thank also advocates in the Guam Legislature for supporting any of the initiatives you've done.
Thank you. The $958,000 in overtime is a shortfall, which was admitted by you guys. And if we have to, for nothing more or nothing less, this is not about politics. I started supporting you guys 7 minutes after I got inaugurated, so there's no politics here. But if we have to pass a bill to appropriate the overtime or to authorize the governor to appropriate that overtime, then I think it is our responsibility to do that and to not point the finger or to blame. Maybe we should walk up to Adam.
Senator, we should have it in this budget.
Can I finish? I'm talking to the chief of police. I didn't interrupt anyone else. Please.
Let's just...
Okay. The $958,000 is an automatic shortfall. But
They
it's the
have not
governor's...
identified that as, that is their total appropriation request for overtime.
But you are asking for flexibility in your budget, which it is your purview and the governor's authority. It's his budget. If he feels that, and by the way, he was also the chairman on appropriations when he was a senator. If he feels that he needs that flexibility, we should allow it to him. Now, if you guys come back and you say we need money for overtime, then it's our responsibility to appropriate that. Everyone in here calls 911 when we need something. Okay? I understand that maybe you should fight for overtime when you're projecting at 2 million or 2.3 million, and you know and you identify the shortfall. If you won't do it, I will. I'll do it during the budget. If we have to put any miscellaneous provisions in there for overtime, I'll do it. I understand your position. As the Vice Speaker said, we appreciate your loyalty, so does he. But there's a lot of police officers in here that you can obviously see are frustrated, that we must ensure the morale of the police department doesn't fall down. My next question is, in the future, to avoid certain things like this, $2.3 million in overtime shortfall, I think the best thing we need to do is we need to get more police officers on the street. Now,
Okay, we'll get to that when we talk about this 42 new officers. I'm just trying to address how much we need for overtime in this budget. In this budget. Senator Munoz Barnes. Okay.
Cito Esmalsi, Mr. Chair, I think maybe I should just ask the question based on the whole total discussion here. Ovi, you said that based on what has happening, the programs with GPD, how many programs or how many based on operations, how many different subject categories do you have within the programs of GPD? Because if you're given the flexibility to transfer from one object class to another, my question to you would be, what programs would be shortchanged because you have to pull to pay for the overtime?
It would only be salaries.
Would be
Because
on
the
the
majority is salaries.
salaries for who? Admin or for officers? For, are you pulling from all?
From all.
So I own a house, and I have to budget for sending my kids to school, feeding them, buying domestic items, the amenities that are needed. I know already that if I'm going to finance all those things, I'm going to need a proposed budget, right? In my head, as a mother or as a financer, to make sure that my house is in order, right?
Correct.
So the question to you is, based on what we need to talk about, because we already knew that we had shortfalls for 2014, am I right?
Correct.
Right? And there's no carryover, right?
No.
Okay. So, besides the 958, we already know there's a shortfall, right?
Just about, yes.
Yes. I mean, just based on the trend, right?
Right.
So, if I were to ask you personally, not anybody else, you, because you've been in the department for how long?
About 30 years.
30 years, right? I know that we've been in about the same time. Would you ask for the increase? I'm just personally, just based from a mother's perspective or someone who cares about how many years you worked in the department and hold the integrity, would you ask for the increase?
Of course, you would always have to ask to increase, even in your personal budget, you will have to ask for additional to meet all your other expenditures and other obligations. Now, not talking personal here with the department, if the budget ceiling is raised for the Guam Police Department, and then like I said earlier to the senator, if the budget ceiling is raised and we are given additional funding for our budget, then of course operations will be increased in addition to whatever overtime we're
Okay,
going
so
to
maybe
need.
the next question I need to ask is, based on the debt ceiling that were you provided, did GPD at any time ask that the debt ceiling be increased for the GPD budget so that we can give to the legislature the appropriation that is needed to supply the proposed overtime? Was there even a oral or written request?
For 2015,
Yes.
I'm not so sure about the discussions with the chief, but preparing the budget, preparing it without the budget ceiling, of course, BPMR is going to just send it back to us, give them a budget meeting the ceiling that they're given to us.
Mr. Chair, I guess just based on the answer, maybe BBMR needs to sit in the front to see if any request was ever garnered from GPD to ask for that proposed overtime for their employees. I mean, okay. Thank you, sorry.
Chief Bordallo,
Yes.
I was trying to follow the logic that you're using as to why you think the $900,000 budget for overtime will be sufficient. And you indicated that because you plan that you guys are going to be hiring, 47 new officers for the next fiscal year, that would then reduce the overtime. So I guess as I was thinking about that logic, I don't know if DOA's ability to process new personnel has changed significantly that you're going to be able to do that in a short amount of time, because I know with DOC it took them over 10, 11 months to put on board maybe 12 people, and you're going to actually put on board 47 new people within a short span of time. I just find that difficult. But maybe you can help me understand where this optimism comes from that you're going to be able to put that many officers on the street such that then it's going to cut overtime by about $1 million.
Well, first of all, thank you, Senator. In September 27, we're graduating 23 civilian volunteer police reserve cycles this year. 23 CDPR personnel this year, police reserves, September 27 of this year. On October 10, there's a graduation of 14 full-time police officers that we're holding a graduation. We have 22 background checks, and they're going through the processes and going through the pre-employment screening on 22 individuals. We're working with the finance team to look at just 20 other personnel actions to recruit additional police officer trainees full-time to make that 42 additional new bodies. And yes, there are particular, I agree, there's a challenge when we're working to work with Department of Administration, but they've been very accommodating in making sure that a lot of our personal actions are attended to, and we coordinate with them in terms of all the pre-screening requirements. But I just want to say that as like what and what Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes had indicated to about how if you move someone's salary, because you run into a shortfall. We have about 2/3 of our men and women who are in the Guard and Reserves. And if they go into their military leave and then all of a sudden they exhaust some of their annual leave, they go into a leave without pay, their salary isn't being used. We use some of those salaries to cover some shortfalls of whatever overtime and move it toward overtime. That's part of some of the flexibility that I'm talking about. We adjust some of that in a fiscal year. And that's been done in FY11 when I inherited a budget on FY11, and there are challenges to that, shortfalls in that, but we cover the overtime that been on FY11, FY12, FY13, which has been really addressed with the advocate of Senator Brent McCready, and then of course now FY14. It will be a different year, but these are just the kind of things that why I'm optimistic when it comes down to adding and increasing the force. It will help reduce some of those particular overtime costs that could be generated.
In adding these 42 additional personnel, does the budget also account for the resources that will be needed to, I'm sure you're going to need to put them in uniforms, equipment, I don't know, extra vehicles?
I think some of the things is that when we aggressively look at federal grants and monies and programs that help defray some of the costs, OV always reminds me you can't supplant, whenever there's something with federal grants and everything else. But I think it's very helpful in that aspect when we aggressively explore grants that provide sometimes, and even Homeland Security grants, look toward equipping our force with the necessary equipment they need to approach any kind of particular threats, whether they're Homeland Security threats or public safety or crime threats.
Okay, fine, thank you. Now, just one last thing about this $2 million overtime shortfall from FY 2014, and you keep saying that maybe the way that you think that can be addressed is if you are given the transfer flexibility to transfer within the department's budget. So just a quick look at the department's budget, 94% of the budget is just for personnel.
Yes.
And the remaining 6%, I guess, pays for your utilities, gas, maintenance of your truck. So I'm wondering, unless there's money to free up or to take from personnel, I just don't understand. Even if you were given the flexibility, I just don't understand where you're going to get find $2 million in your budget to. If you had several $1 million set aside for capital improvements to build a new headquarters or something, maybe you can start with just the one floor and then take some of that money. But your budget just looks so tight. I really don't see where you're going to get the budget, even if you were given the flexibility. So I applaud your optimism, but I think the optimism is maybe, I don't know, I want to say a little unrealistic maybe. But you've been working in the police department longer than I have been around it, so you probably know better how that works. But I just think it's a little bit over-optimistic and really somewhat unrealistic.
Thank you, Senator. I don't want to put on rose-colored glasses and say that there may be, something that just pops out. No one ever predicted 9/11 and September 11. No one could predict some of the close calls of natural disasters and emergency procurement. But again, like I said, I'm confident that when we work and collaborate, with the finance team, and they collaborate again with the legislature here, that we're able to ensure that every single dime that's owed in overtime is going to be paid to the men and women of the Guam Police Department who are owed that overtime.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vice Speaker, I think the only question and concern I have is realistically you need additional resources. Just based on the 94% that was presented by Senator Ada in terms of the allocation for personnel, reality is this is the Guam Police Department. This is perhaps the most visible entity out there in the community providing public safety. And when we hear about the criminal activities out there increasing, guess who gets the brunt of the criticism? Maybe not necessarily your office directly, but our officers who are out in the streets doing the best that they possibly can. And that's why a lot of these questions are being directed. Realistically, if you don't have the flexibility, what would your budgetary requirements be for overtime? That's the plain question. Because anytime that overtime is accumulated and you don't have the funds in your budget, guess what? The certification of those funds, there are penalties associated by law. If anyone were to challenge the action of allowing our officers to serve out in the streets and accumulate overtime without those resources being certified that in fact they have been transferred from another government agency through BBMR or DOA, then the certifying officer within the Guam Police Department will be the individual that will be penalized. So I think that we really need to go back and regroup and understand that we're very fortunate that our police officers out there are very generous in terms of continuing to serve above and beyond and include overtime as part of the obligation to the people of Guam. And the least we could do is continue to provide them that payment and that assurance that within a reasonable time, you're going to be able to get your overtime. Because they just got the $600,000 a year and a half later, after the fiscal year. And that's all we're trying to do here, is to understand exactly what your requirement is, so that we don't have to come back a year from now and give you an additional $1.5 million to take care of your overtime obligation, or necessarily burden the police department. That's the challenge that we're faced with, and we're about ready to entertain the budget. So now's the time to crunch those numbers, and that's what the chairman is trying to do. Crunch those numbers so that it's truly reflective of what your budgetary requirements are. And I leave with this note. I served in the executive branch for a brief stint, and I understand the orders that come down. This is your budget ceiling. And I understand that you have to comply with that. And every statement that comes out of your mouth is, please provide us the flexibility. Please provide us the flexibility so that, in fact, they can move funds around. But then when the direct question comes out about what is your actual requirement going to be in the upcoming FY, $900,000 for overtime is just not going to cut it. That's my personal assessment. Based on the historical accumulation of overtime, even if you were to bring in 42 additional officers, then that $900,000 is just not going to cut it for the entire FY. So I certainly hope that upon the conclusion, either this discussion or the entire budget, that what your overtime allocation is out of this body truly reflects what your requirement is going to be for the FY. Because if there's any time to push the numbers from this end through the chairman, who is incidentally your oversight chair also, not only the budget chair but your oversight chair, then now's the time to be able to provide that information, and that's all I'm requesting, because you're hearing from a lot of our colleagues. We don't want to come back a year from now and deal with this whole scenario about outstanding obligation and overtime not being paid to our police officers, our men and women out there who go out every single day to try to provide public safety to our community. So I appreciate your candidness, but I think that at the end of the day, we really need to be honest with our people and give you the budget that you truly need for this upcoming FY. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a few questions specifically to historically. This is nothing new, right? This overtime issue.
Yes, Senator. Since I was a captain way back in 2009 and also a lieutenant, I've had the opportunity to work together with different chiefs of police and look at the different challenges of going back for supplemental budget requests with every legislature, because there's always been a challenge to meet those overtime costs. Policing, the cost of having a police force and the demands in public service requires sometimes officers and employees that work beyond those hours, and there have been a lot of times in the previous administration where there are natural disasters, and that also affected some of the cost of ensuring there was security. So it is nothing new when it comes down to coming back at the table. I was in a different capacity and asking for a supplemental request from the Guam Legislature.
So I appreciate your consistent statements that you're collaborating with the finance team to address these overtime issues. So the point I'd like to get at is that you stated earlier that you'll work with this budget, but at the end of the day, I think to bring some comfort not to the community but to our general public, does this budget meet the mission and objectives outlined in your mandate?
Yes, Senator, it does meet the mission and demands for our department to provide the necessary police services for the island of Guam, Senator.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the issue, just to continue on where I left off, and I appreciate the questions from Senator Addo, because that was exactly where I was going to go with respect to your statement that the hiring was going to offset the overtime costs. Now, I've been here just long enough to realize how atrociously slow our hiring processes are here. And so if we're looking at hiring offsetting overtime, you mentioned that we're going to be hiring we're going to have 14 full-time graduates on October 10th. Now, does that mean that they're going to be processed and ready to be...
Those 14 have already completed all their training. Yeah, they've already been processed.
By DOA?
Yes.
Yes, by DOE.
So on October 10th, we will have 14 new bodies.
Yes, new bodies.
Now, those 14 new bodies are going to reduce the overtime number, but you also mentioned the 23 CVPRs on September 27th.
Yes, September 27th.
And you're counting on that number also to reduce the overtime issue?
Yes, because they help augment the department.
So we're going to be using reservists to offset professional police officer work.
Yes, I see. Like I had mentioned, and giving kudos to two of these reservists that accompany these full-time officers in mitigating a potential, death on a potential suicide. The training that the CVPRs have is more than enough, and with the high standards they have to function with full-time officers. And actually, a lot of them are real good candidates when we do the selection of that we're currently working on, and in keeping that the 22 background investigations, and working with a list of 22 potential selectees to start another cycle again.
I just find it curious that we're going to be replacing or using reservist expertise to handle full-time police officer work that used to be overtime work. Now, I can understand if we're hiring a full-time police officer and they're meeting the exact same standards as every other PO1 met when they came into the force, and then they're being given an assignment to help offset the OT costs of another PO1 who was doing the same job and probably even has a much higher salary after being on the force for so many years. But to say that a reservist is going to be offsetting the overtime work of a full-time police officer at the exact same quality,
I don't think there is any question about the quality of our current reserve force and a lot of the contributions that they've had reserved. We have 123 reservists in our department right now, and I believe if these 123 reservists, the majority of them are dedicated and working, and help, and they participate in not only traffic enforcement. When I first came into the department, sometimes the stigma of a reservist is that they only just allowed to do traffic enforcement. We push that more toward training them and allowing them and giving them that kind of training to have them actually handle criminal cases. And there was some who actually worked in specialized units, and they're at a whole different level. And I would equate it to how the military gets augmented, Senator, with the Guard and Reserves. You may be a Guam Army National Guard person or a reservist in the Navy, Army, Air Force, or Marines, but you're just wearing that same uniform as a regular active duty member, and you provide that same value to that organization. That's the same thing I equate my civilian police reserve officers, Senator.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't mean to diminish in any way the work of our reservists. I think they make a contribution, but I'm a little concerned that we're having reservists handling criminal cases. Do reservists handle like detective work?
In Chapter 66, which gives me the authority to establish a police reserve force, yes, they are considered peace officers also. And the Title 17 now, with the new Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, are even looking at upgrading the physical fitness standards not only for full-time officers but even for our reserve force. So I think it is they do handle criminal cases, preliminary criminal cases, and as they get grounded and go over 2,000 hours of reserve time, some of them are eligible. Some of them are working in the criminal justice strike force that has been credited for a lot of apprehension of a lot of the violent criminals that were going on in the earlier part of this year, Senator.
I think we'll talk about that more on the chairman's. I still do have some follow-up questions though on the overtime side. Last year's FY2014 overtime amount was $648,000. How quickly did we deplete that?
For 2013 or
2014, the authorized level for this fiscal year was $648.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but when we submitted the FY14 budget, it was without the 40% law enforcement pay.
Oh no, my only question is the $648,000 here for overtime that was authorized in 2014.
Right.
How quickly do we?
Yeah. It was depleted fast because each of the officers, most of the officers that were affected by the 40%, so their salaries were adjusted to that. The budget was submitted without the law enforcement pay.
No, I understand that. What I'm trying to figure out though is since we're going to be appropriating 958,000 in FY 2015,
Right.
I'm trying to figure out how quickly we're going to deplete that.
Oh, how quickly are
Yeah,
we going
because
to?
so how quickly did we deplete $648,000?
There are certain, well, circumstances that comes up, and I don't know about the operations side. That would be the chief of police, or whatever situations that come across during the day-to-day operations. That's unavoidable.
I think, Senator, what we can do is I can have Ovi track and give what were those expenditures from the beginning of the fiscal year FY14 to see what were the average monthly expenditures for overtime and how quickly we burn through that and give you a report back on that.
Yeah, we could do that to be exact, but I can just extrapolate. I mean, if we're looking at $2 million for FY 2014, that extrapolates to $500,000 a quarter, right? Which means that after 2 quarters, we're going to exhaust $1 million.
But
So if we're only appropriating $1 million, then we're looking at best case scenario, running out of overtime money by March. And unless all of these new hires come on board and all of a sudden pick up the entire slack and nobody accrues any more overtime after March.
Yeah. Are we assuming that the every month of the expenditures for every pay period for the FY14 are not the same as what could be in every pay period on the FY15? Because
It's gonna be higher.
Two different kind of, they're different kind of fiscal years.
It's going to be higher because of the law enforcement pay adjustment we just
And
implemented.
we have assignments to come.
So basically it's not enough money for overtime.
I was glad you mentioned the reserve officers.
Yeah.
Last year, I was fairly exorcised when we had the discussion about one of the officers being hurt and was not insured. Have we resolved the issue of your reserve officers being provided health insurance and being protected in the event that they get involved in a car accident or shot because you assigned them to a criminal case?
Yeah, I believe they are still entitled to workman's comp, but there is no provision in allowing them the life insurance or the health insurance as the full-time officers or even retirement benefits because they weren't considered employees of the government of Guam.
So over the last year, since our last discussion on this issue, that has not been resolved?
No, in terms of having them health insurance or life insurance or anything like that.
Since you've been the chief of the Guam Police Department, has the Guam Police Department been investigated by the U.S. Department of Labor for overtime violation?
Yes.
Yes.
And what was the result of that investigation?
As of this time, I haven't had any communication from the Department of Labor in their decision on whether the department will be subjected to a fine for the late payments of overtime that are owed.
Was there discussion that there was going to be a fine of $110,000?
No, Senator, I can't recollect. I gotta check on.
But there was discussion that there was a fine
There
as a
might be a
result of
possible
it.
fine, yeah.
A
There might
possible
be a
fine.
possible fine, yeah.
Where in this budget does it show that you have any money for paying fines for overtime because you did not ask for sufficient amount of money for overtime to pay it on a timely basis?
It's not.
We don't have it here in the budget there, Senator.
So should we write an administrative provision that any fine should be taken out of your salary personally?
No, I wouldn't agree to take it out of my salary.
It may not be that you're going to agree to it, but I'm just saying that
Of course
that
not,
may be the way that we're going to be able to address this and have you start asking for the right amount. Anyway, you also mentioned the law enforcement officers' pay. Does this budget sufficiently cover all 40% increases? The law enforcement pay, is that completely taken care of in this budget for everybody?
Yes.
That was calculated, I believe Ovi did indicate she calculated that for all the 40% for the
And how much,
officers.
how much was that? The law enforcement pay, how much did that increase the overall budget?
Well, I believe it's, if you see in the FY15, we're over $5 million increase from
Yeah.
FY 2015.
Yes, how much of that I'm trying to differentiate between it and the competitive wage. So how much of that increased $5 million was as a result of the law enforcement pay?
And I can
don't know.
I can get the exact numbers and from the
DOA.
finance team, and we can give you the report to give you that exact number, Senator.
The finance team,
Or DOA.
who prepared the budget?
I did.
And how much did you budget for 40% increase?
I'm not quite, I understand, but the reason, the salaries that I was given based from, from the 40%, the dollar amounts or each individual salary amount was calculated by DOA, so we were given that.
So you don't have a number of how
I
much
don't
of that
have-
was?
No, not at this moment.
So do you know how much the Competitive Wage Act has cost your department?
No.
The Hays.
We had requested for that, we had requested for our DOA to provide us that dollar amount, and we have not gotten that from them either.
DOA is going to have to do that?
Well,
Don't you come up with a number and say these are the employees that are going to get Hay salary increases and this is the...
No, the increases, well, we get our guidance from DOA because all everybody's salaries is calculated according to the Hay plan. Not all of them are adjusted down to or up to a certain salary amount. So we get guidance from DOA. But again, like the chief said, if we can get that
If we can
report for
have
you,
time to get that report from you.
and we'll
we
give you
can
the
get that
difference.
distinction.
Over the last several fiscal years, the administration has imposed a reserve against appropriations. In FY12, how much was that amount?
I'm sorry.
The reserve. When BBMR announces that they're taking a reserve from your appropriation for FY12, do you remember what percent of your budget was reserved for 12?
For 12, I don't remember.
We don't have that. We don't have that figure. We can check that again.
Did you receive, by the end of the fiscal year, did you receive all the reserve for 12? All the amounts that had been reserved for 12, did you receive that at the end of the fiscal year?
I'm not sure if I remember that, but I know the BBMR had provided a documentation of the governor's transfer authority with regards to the reserve, but no, I don't remember. They may have, but I don't have that information, Senator. I'm so sorry.
So you don't know whether or not you received your full appropriation?
No. But I can check with BBMR on that.
How long have you been at GPD? Were you there for FY12?
Yes, sir.
FY13, what was the reserve imposed by Adelup?
I believe 15%.
Of that 15%, how much did you receive by the end of the fiscal year? Was returned to you or you were allowed to use? Did you lose that entire 15% or did you receive it? Were you able to utilize it finally?
We've utilized some of it and BBMR has covered, they've given us the opportunity to cover the shortage of personnel in other divisions. And we have asked, not asked, but I'm pretty sure the reserves had covered the shortages in the other divisions. So if one division...
Divisions within GPD?
Within GPD. So it will cover the salaries wherever it's short. It will cover for fuel. We had asked to cover for fuel. We had asked to cover for utilities, power and water, and telephones. So we had indicated to them that this is what we're going to be short of with regards to what our operations is going to need. So then they will do the transfer where it's needed.
If the reserve was 15%, all right, what was that amount?
I don't remember that, sir.
Do you know if you received it? I mean, at the end of the year, did you pay everything? Obviously not, because you didn't pay the overtime, did you, for 13? So how come that wasn't covered in the reserves?
We didn't pay 2013 because the public law, the budget law for 2014 restricts us from paying prior years. So we couldn't pay 2013 only because of that provision in the public law.
Okay. As of today, what was the reserve for this year?
If I'm not mistaken, 10%.
Is the 10% still at Adelup, or have you had opportunity to be able to start tapping and utilizing that amount?
I requested to utilize some of the amounts to
How
pay
much?
for some of the overtime for the first quarter of 2014, but there are still some reserves in the budget because BBMR would not allow us to expend totally the reserves.
How much was your total reserve? Should be fairly easy to figure out 10% of whatever your budget was.
Close to about $2 million.
And were you able to tap that $2 million to make the payment, say, for the $2 million in overtime that you're currently outstanding?
Yes. For first quarter, yes, we did.
Okay.
For first quarter of 2014.
For first quarter. And how much is still left in reserves at Adelup or BBMR?
I think probably less than $1 million. I'm thinking. I did a projection analysis, and the reserves that is available is maybe about $1 million. I could be off here a little bit, but I'm thinking about $1 million or less than $1 million.
When was the last time you contacted BBMR and or DOA to ask to release that reserve so that you could pay your officers their overtime?
In April, March or April, there was a memorandum sent with the chief's signature to BBMR requesting to pay the overtime, requesting to move monies for power and water and telephone.
And was that granted?
Yes.
But you still have $1 million left, right?
It could be less than $1 million, yes.
And when was the last time you asked to have this $1 million released so you could pay part of the 1.7 that's currently outstanding in overtime to your men and women?
I have not asked for it yet.
So am I to get from your testimony today, the last time that you asked Adelup for a release of your reserves was April?
Yes, some of the reserves, yes, and advance the allotments. That's what we had done. And if they have not given me the reserve, then they had advanced the allotments.
So in the last 4 months, you have not asked BBMR or DOA to release that last $1 million so that you could pay for the overtime?
Not yet.
There's no prohibition in this current fiscal year's budget to be able to utilize and transfer those funds to be able to pay overtime, is there?
No.
So if BBMR or DOA would release that $1 million that they currently have in reserve, you could reduce the outstanding overtime to the men and women of the department by $1 million tomorrow. Is that correct?
It could happen, Senator, but I've been advised, and I do agree with that advisement, that GPD is already has a shortfall with salaries. So they advise that we are kind of careful in requesting for those if there is $1 million or less than $1 million in there, but they do advise me that there is a shortfall in our salaries only because the budget, 2014 was under budgeted because when the 40% salaries kicked in. So that kind of make everything else go short faster.
And when do you figure you're going to not have enough money to make your payroll? There's 6 more pay periods of this fiscal year, right?
Right, 6.5 pay periods.
6.5 pay periods. And they're telling you that you're short currently for your payroll, right?
Correct.
Have you asked them to release this $1 million reserve so you could at least make payroll, even if you're not going to pay overtime?
It has been discussed with them, and I do take advice from them, take it under advisement with them, because they would be the ones to approve our request, and it has also been brought up to the chief, so the chief now will have that responsibility on...
When was the last time, Chief, that you discussed with the fiscal team or BBMR or DOA to release your reserves so that you could make sure that you can pay your... to meet the perceived shortage for... no, just payroll, not even overtime, but just to make payroll?
Yeah. Actually, no, I haven't had a discussion in terms of talking about the reserves, the release of the reserves, but just had a prior discussion with BBMR concerning what were...
When was that?
Just, when was that, about 2 days ago or 3 days ago, 2 days ago, in preparation for the this budget meeting to look at what are some of the, what do you call that, prior debt obligations, and, covering what could be anticipated.
But currently...
But not...
The 1.7 is not a prior debt obligation. It's a current year obligation.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need to deal with prior debt obligation. If they would release that the $1 million that they're holding in reserve, you could be assured of making your payroll for the next 6 pay periods.
Yeah.
And whatever balance you have, you could make another $600,000 overtime payment without calling the legislature into special session to pass a $600,000 appropriation to make payments. Couldn't we?
Yes, Senator.
And so when are we going to ask BBMR for that?
Very soon.
Please.
I guess it's still appropriate to ask about the police reserves.
Yes.
Apparently you count on that, those personnel to relieve some of the load, and through that cut down on your overtime requirements. But I was really somewhat surprised that the police reserves are the only thing that covers them is you say, the workman's comp insurance?
Workman's comp, Senator, yes.
So if a police reserve is, and I guess there's no restriction on what kind of assignments they are given, correct? I mean, they can sit behind a desk, or they can go out to the most hazardous calls that the department receives. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So is it your understanding, and do you know for sure that if that reservist takes a bullet, then and he requires extended health care because now and can't be reemployed, workman's comp will cover for all that treatment and for compensation and for the extended treatment? Can you honestly say that workman's comp insurance will cover all that?
No, Senator.
No, it won't. Okay.
No.
So then, I was surprised about this, because I know that when the issue about police reserves came up, I was very I had very strong reservations about relying on these guys, because hey, but they're not covered.
Yes.
And I don't know how much of so how do you mitigate something like that? Either you assign them to a low-risk job behind a desk, radio dispatcher or whatever, or if you're going to send them out and assign them to a high-risk assignment out there, to ride alongside the guy who has medical insurance and everything, and if anything goes wrong, he's covered. Is that police reservist required to sign some kind of a liability release form saying, I know the risks out there, and doesn't matter. If I take a bullet, I take a bullet?
No, Senator. Through their whole training, right when it's time after they swear in for graduation, they swear an oath as an officer, peace officer. Of course, they're always informed. Anytime you can lose your life. You can be maimed, you can be injured permanently, and they know the risk. But they
Is
don't
that
know.
acknowledgement in their personnel jacket, so that then if he does get hurt, that individual cannot come back and try and sue the department?
No, it's not. There's no acknowledgement form for them.
Nothing in writing, right?
Nothing in writing for them.
Okay. So the government's off the hook. Wow,
That's right.
quite a bargain.
And that's the difference between them and your National Guard analogy, right? Because with the National Guard, if they get killed, they get their $450,000, whether or not they're a guard or they're regular military. But a reservist, he gets killed. Tough. There's no life insurance, nothing. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Just one question then. Has any costing ever been made as to if in fact the police reserves were to be provided that medical insurance coverage just for that weekend that they're on duty, how much it would cost?
There's never, to my knowledge, there's never been any cost study on how much we would have to incur in terms of if we had to pay for reservists for health insurance and stuff.
What would the impact be if a restriction was mandated that a police reservist who is not covered by health insurance can only be assigned to a low-risk assignment? Radio dispatcher, I don't know, I guess the front desk. What would that impact have?
I think mentally for the current reservists now, 123, who are looking at serving the people of Guam, and risking their life and knowing they're just volunteers and they're not covered by life insurance and only limited to the workman's comp. It might impact them if all of a sudden there was regulation to say you're only restricted to a desk or you're restricted to traffic direction or something low risk and you can't perform like any other police officers.
Yeah.
It costs a little bit of, I would say, it would demoralize.
Yeah, I really would like to have that opportunity to talk with a police reservist and his family.
Yes.
To see if they really understand what the implications are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to go out there and serve the community for God and country and all that, and maybe that's good for a single guy. Okay, just him.
Yeah.
But man, if he's got a family of 4 or 5 kids, I don't know that. I mean, I don't know how to describe that.
For the edification of the members and for the public, after we had this discussion about a year ago after that car crash on Route 3, what was the announcement that came out of Guadalupe as it relates to providing for insurance for the reservist?
I believe I can't recall. What the
Wasn't the pronouncement out of Guadalupe that they were opposed to providing for the health and life insurance for the reservists?
All I know is that the concern is always was about is there any unfunded is it unfunded, or how does it affect the overall budget, and we're going to be including life insurance and how it would affect police department, because we're not the only ones who are empowered to have a reserve force. There are other agencies in the Guam, like the airport police.
I understand. We're dealing with yours, and we're trying to figure out, because there was somebody hurt. And when we had that discussion, and I can have my staff send in a copy of the news release from Guadalupe, that they were opposed to providing for the health insurance for them. I'm just so that the members understand that. Wasn't that recollection correct?
I believe so, yes, about
Thank
the
you.
health insurance.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the question of the police reservists and our full-time police force, I'm having a difficult time trying to reconcile what it is that's being stated here today, in that when you were asked by Senator Ada if reservists are taking on every single possible duty of a police officer, your answer is yes.
Yes.
So what's the difference between a reservist and a full-time police officer?
Full-time police officer is fully employed, recognized Department of Administration.
I'm talking about qualifications.
Oh, qualifications. I don't see any difference in their qualifications. Every reservist that comes in, the reservists during my time are going through over 32 weeks of training, and so roughly over 320 hours of criminal law enforcement training by our staff officers, and they graduate from a cycle. So they're embedded with the same kind of philosophy, that full-time officers go through when they're in the cycle. The only difference is our reserve officers' cycles are in the evenings, because some of them hold full-time jobs. Some of them are members of this community, have a full-time job, and some of them are security officers from other different private security, agencies, or they come from. It's like a community-oriented program. So, but at the product at the end, I don't see any distinction that when they're swearing in with their badge and gun, they know the responsibilities of an officer and what they're supposed to do to provide professional services as a police officer, and they assume the same risk, when they're responding to life and death situations.
So a reservist is 100% as qualified as a full-time professional police officer to be doing the same kind of work.
Yes.
You're under oath, Chief. Are you sure?
Yeah, the police reserve officers that I said from the beginning, all the reserve officers that I had as a reserve officer under my watch have undergone all trainings and have the same qualifications as a GPD officer in terms of them functioning to do their job.
So why are we still even bothering hiring full-time police officers?
Well,
what's the difference? I mean, why do we even have basic law enforcement academy and those kind of things? I'm really having a difficult time grasping the notion that a full-time police officer and a reservist are equal in terms of their skills, trainings, and ability to do their job.
Well, a full-time officer is full-time. He works 43-hour work weeks, and from the lower echelon. A reserve officer is only mandated to come in 21 hours just to stay in the program, 42 hours, and they get a stipend. And of course, they're not full, but that's the difference between full-time and a reservist. I mean, in terms of their work hours. But after a reservist stays in the program long enough and accumulates the same skill set in terms of, because they're handling criminal cases, then that's what I mean in that context, that they're no different than a full-time officer in terms of their qualifications and the experience they're gaining as they're working on the job. As we talk, there's some reserve officers who are summoned to court, to testify in traffic or even criminal cases. And that's where I'm making that, comparison, Senator.
See, and that's where I'm a little concerned still, because, like, for example, right, you use the military as an example. You're putting reservists throughout the department into various positions without any kind of limitation based on the difference between a reservist and a full-time police officer. I mean, imagine in our military if we were taking reservists and making them handle nuclear submarines. There's a reason why we have a professional military force and a reserve force, and we do have a difference in what the reserves are intended to do, which is augment the core mission of the professional services. But what you're saying is that the reserves aren't an augment, they are being put in the exact same duties and responsibilities and positions as our professional police force.
That's right. The reservists who are 123 reservists that we have, those that are in the program, and they could be, as I said, I gave an example. 2 of these reserve officers were accompanying 3 officers on a call for an individual who was going to harm herself. And they assume the same risk too when they're with the other 3 officers.
Yeah, the anecdotal stories are great. I mean, that's really nice. That's great. I'm glad that turned out that way.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about a professional standard here.
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about, it was great that we had these guys and they were there and they took care of this problem. I'm concerned. I mean, are reservists handling evidence in high-profile cases? Are they investigating things like murders and rapes and handling the process that eventually needs to get adjudicated by our Attorney General. You know, I'm a big believer, and I don't know how this is going to work or sit well with anybody, but I believe that there's a big distinction between a professional police officer who does that as a career and a reservist.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there is value to putting in all those hours in the job and to gaining all that experience and to having that professionalism and that accountability. And there is a distinct difference between doing that and being a reservist. But what you're saying is you're using reservists to go almost anywhere in the department, and you're applying them into the police force as if they were part of the professional service.
The moment they graduate, they're grounded and they're assigned.
That's like saying like a substitute teacher, you know, because they meet the minimum qualifications by law is the same as a 20-year veteran in the classroom.
I'm just saying that that's why I support the reserve force and everything that they've done to contribute. All 123 who come from different backgrounds, some of them from our military veterans who are in the reserve force, who probably have the experience of working in a war zone, who bring that skill set to the department, and certainly are mature enough as they demonstrate in their training to assume any kind of function, but not limited to just like when I remember coming in the force 28 years ago and just seeing them only limited to directing traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chief, ma'am, so we've been talking a lot about the overtime, about the requirements, about those particular standards. In reviewing your budget, where does the budget for training come in? How do you budget for training? Do you budget for training?
No.
Do your officers get regularly trained?
Well, you know, when it comes down to training, off-island training or online training, on-island training, sometimes we look at, especially incident command systems or Homeland Security. Some of them are online, they're free. Sometimes we utilize and we network with other agencies that have individuals who have certifications, but we also invest in some of our funds. We'll use asset forfeiture funds. I'll just give an example. We use asset forfeiture funds to train a couple of officers in K-9, for K-9 patrol drug detection, send them off island. They came back. They have, we have 3 drug detection dogs. They're trained not only to handle the K-9, but now they're trained to train other individuals on other local agencies who might have an interest. So, yeah, we invest using some specialized funds in terms of our asset forfeiture. But sometimes Guam Homeland Security, Office of Homeland Security is always added on additional grants to help fund the
Okay, thank you. And so what I'm hearing then is that there is not a structured professional development plan for our police officers. And as well, we don't need to belabor this point, but I am certain that we all agree that we'll go through a training program, a certificate program, and then we're boots on the ground, and then there's always something more to learn.
Yes.
Always. And in today's world here on our island, as we are talking about insurance and that kind of protection for our officers and our families, there's also protection for the community that you are serving and you are protecting. And it's really important that we continuously ensure that our men and women in blue are given the skills and the attitudes, the competency to know how to best work with all of us in the community. And that is a really high concern of mine.
Thank you for saying that, Senator. And
so I'm not done yet. Yeah. Thank you. And so the idea is that as we are seeing justice being dispensed, and as even if you have a mental illness, you still may go away for life when you totally lose it, right? And so we have a lot of work to do on this island to be aware of, to know how to, and where to send these folks, and to ensure that they get the help that they need. And many times they're not going to want it. So then what do we do? And in particular, what do your men and women do? Because you're in the front lines. How are you going to deal with a family like me when you're going to tell me that I have to put Eric away, but I know that's not the answer? So the training aspect, Chief, is really crucial. And so what I would like to see done, and I know it's not in this budget, and I know you use some assets forfeiture, and I know you collaborate with Homeland and with police and airport and everybody else. But I think it's really important that you come up with a really well developed professional development plan in collaboration with GCC, because I know they do most of your training. I've talked with the folks up there. I certainly talked to a lot of family members. We still don't have an identification system for those of us with disabilities, which I really think would help you all, so that when you get a call from a certain address, you already know it's me, and you already know you don't have to put me in jail, but you do know you have to calm us down. Everybody needs to know how to work with us, and that's not happening. And it's going to keep escalating. And it's going to keep on happening because that's where we are today in 2014. So it's not here, but I would hope that as we go through the next year, we work on that professional development plan and what that looks like and how that's going to work. I know that you came to a forum we had, and we talked about mental illness, we talked behavioral wellness, we talked about particular programs that the police already use, and we were going to upgrade that, but I haven't heard that that has been upgraded. And how do we help you ensure that your men and women are safe and competent, so that all of us are safe and competent. And there was another point I was going to raise, but it escapes my mind. So I just want to end. We don't need to deliberate or debate the issue, but I do want you to know that that's really important. That's as important as saying that you're insured, that you have health insurance. That whole mental issue is just essential for, I'll tell you, General Orders 12-03, you guys got that cranked out. I was really happy you got it cranked out, but I just read a study by a group of students that as they spoke to your recruits, they've heard of General Orders 12-03, but they really don't know what it means. So that's the first step. We got the policy written, and we've got that guidance. But it doesn't do us any good if we aren't able to put that in action so that everybody is safe, right? So, Mr. Speaker, I'm just putting that on the record. I know it's not in the budget, but the whole training aspect is just really key to making sure that you are all safe and as we are safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The officers go through a lot, and I know you know that, Chief, and I'm just wondering if there's a process in place that, not when it happens, but preventative measures to make sure these officers are, there's a lot of things that they go through aside from their duties, but to ensure that there are kind of, I'm not trying to search for the term, but there's things they see that a lot of us don't see, so is there a process in place that kind of brings these officers in just to make sure that, they're still order functioning well and that, everything's okay? I'm just saying there's, they call it different terms in the military, but I'm sure it still applies to our officers who see traumas out there and see different types of, again, tragedies that we don't experience on a daily basis. So, I'm sure it causes them to go through emotional issues and taking it to the home front or from the home front to the department. So is there anything in place that...
Well, Senator, it begins even with leadership, because even at the first line supervisor to engage their subordinates and look, if you have an officer who's having a problem, and we're working with behavioral well and healthness center, that if there's any officer who has some issues, but we're also, I have the discussion with our personnel officer who says that we don't have the budget for a staff psychologist, but we definitely when we can anticipate, that there could be, funding and contractual services to look at staff psychologists, and maybe even look with working with the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, because they always encompass all the peace officers to make sure that not only they're physically fit standard, but they're also looking at how to make sure that peace officers, their mental health, because it'll affect the performance of their job. Those are the kind of things that we're just is the kind of thing I'm discussing with the personnel officer, and I want to continue that dialogue with the Peace Officers Standards Training Commission, which, again, like I said, I was about to mention, two of these CBPR, the reserve officers who assisted in this depressed individual who almost committed suicide, are female CBPRs. And actually, the irony is we have more female police reserve officers than our full-time, women police officers in our department, which I want to try and pick up and ask, like you said, Senator Mike, why don't we just, if they have all those skill set and training, get them to come into our department. Some civilian police reserve officers got picked up by another agency, like the airport police, or one got picked up at the Port Authority police. So there are other areas that they're applying for to get in the door before we picked up on them, and lost them as a potential full-time employee. But even though they're working at airport police or working at the court as a court marshal or Port Authority police, they're still working in our aspect as a police reserve officer.
Thank you, Chief. Very early on in the term, I met with your management team. You were part of that, and I just want to say I appreciate the efforts made to make adjustments. Some of your guys are here, were part of some meetings, but they made adjustments to the fee structure to address the administrative shortfalls in the as far as administering the clearances. I mean, of course, you had a listing on the fee structure, but that was done in January, right? My understanding.
Right.
So,
yeah, effective February.
Is it? Can we say that we're projecting to cover that shortfall? My understanding, the shortfall in that area was around 400,000. My understanding, and the justification of the fee structure. Adjustment to the fee structure was to address that shortfall. So could we say that since we implemented that in January, could we say that the projections are on track to cover that shortfall for FY 2015?
We can check with, well, of course, we have to go back and check with the revenues and BBMR, and if they're going to allow us to increase our appropriated amount for police services fund, and or whatever that needs to be done, then we'll be in the right track. But we'll have to get guidance with BBMR on that part.
But I'm sure there should be some in-house ledger that would track the new fee structure that is basically to address the shortfalls that is done administratively to carry out those functions of issuing out firearm certificates or clearances. I mean, the list goes on, and your management team did an excellent job in putting together a fee structure, and that it was long overdue. And that was to address the shortfalls in that area. I just want to know if we're tracking in that area with that new fee structure to cover that 400,000 shortfall. Because that was really the justification of the adjustment to the fee structure.
Yes, Senator, you're right, because not only do we want to recover our administrative costs that we do, records and identification
Right.
processing and those costs, but if there's with that increase, if it does amount to a little bit more than was anticipated, then we want to, of course, use that because it covers police operations.
Right, and it also addresses the maintenance issues, the upgrades, I mean, technological advances there, training.
Yes.
So I know that Senator Yamashita alluded to that. So that was a lot of the reasons behind that that was to be used for specifically those items that she was addressing.
Yes.
And also to upgrade some of the infrastructure needs in your department. So
That's correct, Senator.
I just want to make sure that's what it was for, and it's to help offset the shortfall in that area, to bring everything at least to some advancement in that area. I know it's also I'm not sure it was to hire personnel, but I know it's specifically to advance the services there and address the shortfalls. So, and also for training, my understanding.
Yes.
So, is it possible to provide us a tracking of that and see if it's, if it needs adjustment?
We can get a report
Okay.
out for you, Senator.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Thank you. We've been talking about your 42 officers, and I've gone through the budget a couple of times, and I've had the staff go through it a couple of times, because...
Yeah.
Am I reading this correctly? I find in the budget allocation for 22.
Yes.
Where are we, or how are we paying for the other 20? It's not in the budget, is it?
No, the 20 was just recent. That was from the FY2014 DOI Compact Impact that we just submitted the GG ones to BBMR. That's where the 20 came in.
For 14.
It's-
How are you going to pay for them in 15? Are they budgeted for in 15, or are you going to carry over DOI Compact Impact to pay for them?
Carry
in 15?
over in the DOI Compact Impact because we haven't utilized it. We just sent the GG ones in for recruitment process. So it's not in the budget for 2015. The 22 is in the budget, but not the 20 because it was just recent.
And how much is the 20? Are the 20 going to cost you?
We're given 800,000.
800,000.
Yes.
Is that sufficient to pay for 20 people for 12-month period?
Yes. There be a POT status at that point when we bring them in.
Police officer trainee.
Yes.
And
At the
how much
entry
is
level.
that? And what's the salary of a POT?
I believe it went up to
About 20.
21,000.
But we've also at the same time, I think she told me she applied for a COPS grant funding, which federal government covers for, if we get the grants approved, covers for a 3-period, which includes training and then, right? Training and salaries, I believe.
Just
Has that been
salaries.
received?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No, we just submitted
You submitted it, but it's not even been approved yet, has it?
It's not approved
Not
yet.
approved yet.
It's being reviewed by Department of Justice at this time.
And when did the application close for that grant?
It already closed. We're already in the review process.
And when will you get an announcement as to whether or not you can...
Normally, they would tell us
award
they'll
it.
wait for the ending of the fiscal year, so we'll probably hear from them by the beginning of the fiscal year. So it's their timeline. But it's normally after the fiscal year ends.
So, am I to understand that we are going to be able to pay for the personnel cost for all 42 with benefits within this budget?
Not the 42, just the 22. Because it's already budgeted.
The other
The-
20 is coming from someplace else.
the-
And that's going to be enough money? You're not going to...
The 16 only is the GPD police cycle. The other 6 is from the COPS grant. So that's why there's 22. So one is federal, one is local. Then the Compact Impact, which is the 20, that will start in the new fiscal year, but it's not budgeted. In probably the 2016, we'll probably put them in the staffing pattern. Except the COPS grant. I have to fulfill the 3 years.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the carryover for the compact impact from DOI, that's $800,000.
Correct.
Okay, and the $850,000 that we appropriated last year for a police cycle, that's in the 22 or the 47?
In the 22.
That's in the 22.
Yes.
Okay, so now the 350,000 that,
16, I'm sorry, it's correct. 16.
That's for the 16.
Because the 6 is COPS grant.
okay, and they'll be graduating soon.
The 16 is still going through the pre-employment process.
And the new vehicles that you received last year, or early this year, that was a part of the $350,000 compact impact monies that you guys received, correct?
Yes.
Do you guys receive that again, or is that part of the carryover? Are you going to request for another?
We have to request for another.
And
We have to
are you
request.
anticipating requesting some more money for more cars?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So when these 22 new officers, as you called it, hit the floor or hit the ground, we would probably need more police cars to accommodate that. Correct? So do we anticipate that the police cars and the officers kind of together hit the streets? So we would have to apply for that grant from Compact Impact, because if we have 22 new officers, it's going to be counterproductive when 3 or 4 people are riding in one car, correct?
That's correct, Senator.
So do we anticipate getting some of those grants from Compact Impact to buy new cars? And if we do, how much cars are we looking at?
We're looking at, for each car, totally equipped.
Well, how many total cars?
What total cars? I'm not.
I think we received 8 this past.
I think last time we had 8. We could only fund for 8 marked patrol vehicles, for patrol vehicles.
And we received all of the cars. I know there were some protests, but we received all of the cars that we bid out for. Those protests are finished now, and we received the cars. There was a second process. Where are we with that second process?
The
With the RFP.
350 that from local
Yes.
funding, that is, we're waiting for the purchase order to be issued by GSA.
Okay,
The bidding has already been done.
So the vehicles are, so we should get another 8 or 9 cars before the 22
7
officers.
cars.
7 cars, before these 22 officers.
They're SUVs,
SUVs.
right.
We ordered SUVs again? V8s?
These are police special SUVs.
Okay. Next year, when we get these 22 to 47 officers, we should get more cars, obviously.
Yes.
How about bullets and firearms?
In terms
Have we
of some-
budgeted for the influx of new employees?
in terms of some of the ammo and ammunition,
Yes.
we're using some of our asset forfeiture money to purchase ammunition
that
in the
enough?
department right now.
Is that going to be, when you project the
No.
new
No.
officers and
No, it may
asset
not be
forfeiture?
enough, and that's why we have to sometimes look at how, again, as Senator Morrison said, on the fee increase for training and ammunition
Okay.
and stuff that they need.
Current officers, are they equipped with the proper equipment? I know cars are a problem. How about firearms and ammunition? Are we up to date in standards
We're going to need firearms.
and quantity?
We definitely need additional equipment in terms of firearms with the standard issue that we have in terms of Glock
Is
issues.
is that
Or-
in the budget?
No.
Okay, so
I just asked that earlier, excuse me, Senator,
sorry.
but
I'm
I
sorry.
asked that earlier
Yeah.
about does the budget include
Yeah.
resources to be able to fully outfit the new, and you said yes. Did I misunderstand you?
All right. Well, we definitely need more additional firearms and everything else that the ASO just
Well,
told me.
that's what I meant. I mean, you got a body,
Yeah.
but you're gonna have to put him in a uniform. You're gonna have to give him firearms, and so that's what I asked. And you says, yeah, we're ready. We've got the budget ready to take on these 42 guys. I know you're saying no.
Yeah.
Or was that because it was an hour ago?
Yeah.
I am listening.
Yeah,
I'm still
several
very
people are.
listening very intently.
Yeah.
So,
no problem, sir. I'm a freshman. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to
Yeah.
project. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not perfect here.
Yeah.
So we may have to go back to the drawing
Yeah.
board and reproject what our finances, revenue, and what our incoming officers will be. Hopefully, we can meet that halfway, and we don't shortchange the new officers and then take away from the current officers.
Yes.
Okay, my next question is, we have 300 officers right now. 304
302.
total officers on the street working.
We have 302 police officers right now.
How many vehicles working?
I estimate there's probably about 50 vehicles right now.
Working.
The force right now.
Patrol, not in traffic, not just patrol.
About 20, probably about
20
of
working.
them.
How many reservists? 123, you said?
123 reservists.
123.
1.0.
And we're getting 22 new officers. To right-size the police department, we need 450 to include attrition and all that other stuff. How much do we need? How many do we need?
it's hard to get at an exact figure in terms of how many total full-time sworn
Yes,
officers
on
we
the
could be
street.
able to have in terms of what would do.
Well,
what it would
okay,
take to
here's a better
mitigate the
question.
crime.
How many people do you have in our biggest community dedicated right now? On shift? What's a shift command? How many officers?
You probably have 6 officers on duty.
6 officers. What would be the right size, the standard industry size for a municipality of Dedido?
Well, some figures that are thrown, some ratios that are figured is you want 1 officer for every 1,000.
And what do we? So we're 30 or 40 officers short.
The DFAIs, the military set 1 to every 531, and
So
you can't have a 700.
So just say from that perspective, right? Excuse me. From that perspective, we are, let's say, because of attrition, let's say 200 officers currently short. So let's say we need to add 200 more officers, and we're going to add 22, and then another 23, 24, 47 new total, correct?
42.
42, okay, 42. That still leaves us with a tremendous shortfall. Would it be your position that we should have, or we should fund a cycle each budget year until we hit the ultimate number or the optimal number that you guys are using, the optimal number of police officers out there? So we could right size the police department and not only protect our officers, protect overtime and protect the communities. Shouldn't we be aimed at that? Should we right size this police officer?
Part of our goal and in terms of command, I got to really commend our command staff because we dialogue together.
Well, I commend you guys. I think you're doing too much for too less. But what my question is, there's no shortness of commending the police department. You guys do a fabulous job with what you have. My question is, should our focus be on right sizing this police department so we get more efficiency, we get greater crime prevention instead of catching the robber after he commits the crime? I know we're not perfect, but we need more police officers, and I think sometimes we're missing the point. We're talking about overtime, and we're grilling you on things, but I think the lowest lying fruit here is we're understaffed, and public safety should be at the top of the list along with education and healthcare, but I don't see that. So my question is not about commending the officers. I commend you guys 100%. We need to right size the police department. We have to take into account different aspects of losing officers, and we need to budget for you guys like we did last year, every year until we get right sized. And I just think that when we don't do that, we're liable. The community's liable. I'm not going to sit here and blame anyone. I blame ourselves. We should all work together to find it. Find that sweet spot, like Senator Ada always says. We need to find that. So I know we can sit here and argue and point the finger and go back and forth, but what are we doing to solve the problem? And so Chief, I'm going to ask you publicly that we have to work together, the 15 of us,
Yes.
yourself and Adalu, to right-size this police department so the people behind you don't think in their mind when they go to sleep that I can retire because I don't need this. We have to fight for them in that way. I really appreciate your loyalty and your fight in you, but we have to fight for them. And that's not a political statement. I'm just saying. And the way we do it is action, not words. Substance, not sound. We need to right-size the police department, and if we don't, then we are failing them. So that's what I want to make public. That's what we should be focusing on, and I hope that message gets across, and we can do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And now I thank Senator McCready for understanding what I mean when I say fighting for the police department. So, And I appreciated Senator McCready's questions and Senator Atta's sharp eye. Senator Atta's eagle eye always impresses me, because my questions were going to get into the supplies, materials, and equipment, and how that number here that you have in the requested budget doesn't jive with the increase in personnel. Your supplies, materials, and equipment budget year over year actually goes down from a combined $588,000 in 2014 to $559,000 in 2015, and yet we're adding 24 more bodies. And so Senator McCready hit the nail on the head when he was talking about armaments, ammunition, as well as I received some concerns from police officers concerning their bulletproof gear, without going into too much detail for the sake of their safety. But how can we say that we're going to be adding 24 more bodies, improving the ability of the police force to be able to go out and meet its mandate, while at the same time having a lower supplies, materials, and equipment budget? It means that someone's going to have to give up something. So how much are we short also now? Because we've already pretty much made it clear that the overtime is an issue. We've made it clear that police cars are an issue, and now on the supplies, materials, equipment, how much are we actually going to need in order to not only meet these additional 24, but to actually fully and properly outfit the existing 302?
I have to get into that details, Senator. I have to get with Ms. Nelta to get that breakdown from our support division, from especially the armory for the equipment and our supply for the issuance of equipment like
and see,
firearms.
This is what really bothers me, because when we have these budget hearings, right, and this is the way government works. In the legislative branch, we appropriate the money. Your job isn't to come here and defend what the governor's asking for. Your job is to come here and tell us what the police department needs. And so, when you say we're going to come back and get back to you, the whole reason why we're here is because you guys are supposed to bring both numbers. Yeah, sit down and defend the governor's numbers as needed, but you also should be able to pull out right away and say, you know what? Yeah, if we could get all the supplies and equipment we actually need, this is the number that we would like to shoot for. You guys see where I'm coming from? And that's why I'm a little frustrated here, because we've been here for, what time did we start, Mr. Chairman? We've been here for about two and a half hours, and the whole conversation has been about, praising and saying, I trust this and I trust that. But what we need this is a budget hearing, so we need to know what the numbers are, and we need to know what the department needs. And so to say, we're going to come back and get that back to you, we need the whole exercise here isn't to say this is what the governor's asking for and it's good and here's why. The exercise is, this is what the governor is asking for, but this is also what we need, and how can we as a legislature try and figure out how we're going to balance this budget in the end. So we need a solid idea of what the overtime is going to be, what the supplies, materials, and equipment is going to be, not just for the existing, but the projected new hires that are going to be coming into the department. Okay. We need those, and we need them right away, because we already had a committee on rules meeting this morning to go into budget session next week. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As long as we're talking equipment, this legislature in 32-65 appropriated $400,000 in escheated funds to purchase vehicles. Has the Guam Police Department received any of that $400,000 from 32-65?
It has been encumbered already. We're waiting for the vehicles to be delivered. A purchase order has already been issued. The bid was just completed by GSA about a week or two.
Okay.
So we're
all 400?
waiting. About, yes.
And the equipment amount that the Senator makes reference to, the 588, was that fully expended? For this current fiscal year, you have 588, as he pointed out, 588,000 for equipment. Right? Have you received all 588,000?
For equipment?
For FY14,
Uh,
right? FY14?
Yes.
588.
Category 250 in your digest. Run it across. Equipment, 588, 748.
That's supplies. That's part of, the bulk of that number is fuel. Fuel falls under supplies category.
Oh, it may be worse than that. It may be zero, come to think of it. It could be zero.
Yeah, 588 is part of, the bulk of it is fuel.
So how much have you expended for supplies this year? And how did you pay for it?
For our use for the department, office supplies and other materials, we sometimes get it from the police services fund for supplies.
And there are other programs.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. For equipment.
For equipment, we're not budgeted for equipment unless we submit our request to BBMR to move funds around to purchase equipment. Otherwise, equipment some of it is funded under federal grants for specialized units. But for the department's use, there wasn't any for 2014, but I've included it in 2015. I'm requesting for printers and some workstations because some of our workstations are becoming obsolete.
Okay, maybe I'm asking for the wrong category. Where would you have bullets, guns, flak jackets?
It'll be still under supplies, but we would utilize, I utilized just not too long ago the police services fund. There is an under support division, that program. There's supplies in there. I've tapped into that account for
So
the
I wasn't wrong when I
ammunition.
pointed out 588. So,
No, you weren't wrong. But I'm just saying
So-
the bulk of
so how
that is
much
for
of-
fuel.
bulk of it for fuel. How much
Yes.
did you spend for guns, for weapons, whatever you call them, armament and protective gear?
We have not purchased ammunition, weapons. The last purchase for Glocks was about 3-4 years ago for Glocks. The ammunition, a purchase order, a requisition has just been submitted for ammunition. There was one that was purchased last year, ammunition, just for the qualifications. The vests, we have vests that was purchased under prior compact impact funds, and individuals or like, for example, the POTs that are graduating, they will be issued what we have for the ballistic vests. And that's what they'll be assigned.
How long ago was that?
Which one?
The vest. When were those purchased?
About 3-4 years ago?
Is there an
4 years
expiration
ago.
date on those, or is there a date that after which they probably should not be used?
There may, I have to check on this particular one if there is an expiration date, but most vests, yes, they do have expiration dates.
And Chief, are you aware of whether or not that date has passed on the equipment?
No, I haven't had any communications from the support division who handles that bulk, and also operations bureau chief on what are the expiration dates or the amount that have been issued in terms of their bulletproof vests or anything that we have in supply.
When was the last time you spoke to anybody in support division to determine whether or not those vests have not expired?
Well, I haven't spoken to anyone in support division in terms of any status report on the bulletproof vests.
In this year, how about last year?
This year, last year.
Or the
No,
previous
Senator.
year?
No, Senator.
No discussion at all?
No discussion on that.
Any
No.
report from them saying?
No one's brought up any issue in terms of issuance of the bulletproof vest in the department right now to me this year, last year, or the year before.
Okay. In the question about vehicles, I listened to the words that are used, and your response was marked patrol vehicles. What else is purchased What other vehicles are purchased with department funds?
We have unmarked vehicles too, for specialized unit like detectives, the criminal investigations, the bureau. And also, they've had some, I believe, OV can expound that there are even some unmarked vehicles that they have for administrative purposes at headquarters.
For what purpose?
What the chief is referring to is we had leftover funding from a 2013 Compact Impact. I requested BBMR or governor's approval to utilize the remaining funds because we already purchased the 8 patrol cars. So there was remaining funds, and we requested if we can utilize it for unmarked vehicles, and that would be for Criminal Investigations Division. So a requisition was submitted, and we were able to procure 5, so we're waiting for the bidding to go through the process.
Were any of these funds, Compact Impact, utilized for executive security vehicles?
No. The executive security has 3 vehicles on lease, yes, and it's been on lease since 2 years ago. So they are...
And who pays that lease?
Government, GPD, government funds.
Who pays that lease?
GPD.
GPD. And where is that in this budget?
Under contractual services.
And how much is that costing you on a monthly basis?
About, for all 3, about $35,000.
How much?
$35,000.
A month?
A month. There's 3 vehicles. Oh, 17,000, I'm sorry. I think, yeah, 17,000 a month for 3. So it's a 3-year lease. So the lease will be up by next year.
17,000 a month?
Yes.
My DI math division comes out to about $5,600 per car a month.
For all 3 vehicles.
I understand. That wasn't my testimony. It's not my testimony. That's why I'm asking.
I'm trying to get my figures here.
I understand.
I can get the direct number
No,
for you.
but I'm saying you should have something in there that shows in the digest how much you're paying, and find your digest and tell me how much you're paying out of GPD for executive services. Executive protection cars. What kind of cars? What are the 3 vehicles?
It's
It's big and black.
SUV, right? SUV type.
yeah, it's a big.
Yeah, it's big and black. I've seen them.
I believe one of them is an Expedition, and it's 2 Explorers. I'm not sure, but it's in the digest, Senator. It's not detailed if a line per line item. It is under the contractual services, and it's covered for everything for a certain amount. So everything is lumped into one. But that whole number will cover what we have under contractual services.
In the schedule, it's all lumped together.
Yes, sir.
Under contractual.
Yes, sir.
Who pays the purchase orders of the monthly payments?
Comes out of GPD's budget.
I understand, but do you process and sign off this should be paid and send it to DOA, or does it go directly to DOA? How's that?
We get monthly invoices, we process it and send it to DOA.
Okay. And so you've seen the invoices.
Yes.
How much are the invoices per month?
I've asked someone to get the numbers for me, Senator. I know I've seen a lot of invoices. That doesn't click into my head, but I know I do have that monthly invoices, and the number is not up here. So I will get it to you somehow before the hearing is over.
Just for the record, if it's $17,000 a month times 12 months, that's $204,000, and that's already 50% of the entire supplies and materials budget for the department, the Guam Police Department.
Thank you, Senator.
We note that after that, it's almost anticlimactic to ask any questions. But your power has gone up by 84%. Is this because of the new location of your headquarters?
Partially, the forensics lab is the one that incurs a higher power than the two headquarters combined because of their 24-hour, the coolers and the chillers has to be on, and that pulls more power. And again, to top it off or to add on to every time there's an increase on GPA side, so that does affect the increase in our power bill.
As long as we're discussing that, I think Senator McCready and I met with some of your people. If memory serves me right, they were saying that evidence is being lost because of improper storage. Have we addressed that?
I don't know. Chief?
I'll let him ask the questions because he was the one that brought those people in.
Well, I haven't had any, in this past year, any report to me of evidence being lost. But I'll just let you know this, that we have made it an issue that we need to, as part of our goals, is to move toward the current where evidence control section is at right now in Tejan. It's a dilapidated building, and we definitely need to, and we're working with Forensic Division to say, scout out a location. We need to find a place where we could lease a new evidence control section to ensure the proper security things there to prevent any potential, theft of evidence. But
is that in this budget?
They're doing their best with.
No, I understand, and those two were wonderful when they came in, and they were so dedicated. I mean, I think they're even using their own money to do certain things to assist. Is there anything in this budget to address the relocation of the evidence control section?
I think we did. We tried to do a bit, an RFP, but we didn't have any location to.
Well, as I said, when we're looking at this budget and we're taking a look at how the police services funds and part of those, police services funds are looked at contractual services. We're in the process of reviewing how we could be able to cut the cost of some of those police services funds that are allocated toward the maintenance radio communications to get a more cost share among the other agencies who use our radio systems and use that savings toward what I'm trying to do is toward looking at the evidence control section and I believe the Forensic Division is looking at their relationship with the judiciary in terms of the amount of money that are being allocated to for them for maintenance and for the kind of resource needs they need at the forensic lab, which is the evidence control section is part of the Forensic Division now.
You mentioned cost sharing with other departments that use your communications, right? I note there's a 20% decrease in your telephone cost. Congratulations, but how was that achieved?
Telephone only because of the protest that's still ongoing. We're only dealing with what the amount that was given to GSA, whatever the agreement is between GTA, and we just deal with a certain amount every month, and it's all being processed under an emergency PO. So
I received a call within the last couple of weeks by a very concerned citizen. There was a situation involving the police recently, and it involved multiple locations. Without mentioning the name, I'm sure you can figure it out. multiple locations that there had to be police officers in at least a dozen places around the island. This citizen was concerned about the fact that there didn't seem to be an ability of the officers to communicate with each other. Are we using radios, or what's your communication system like at this point?
Our communication system right now is, it doesn't matter if you are assigned to the northern side of the island or the southern side of the island. The communications has the ability to patch both precinct channels, to each other, or even specialized units, so that you have interoperable communications that can take place.
Utilizing what?
They're using Motorola radios that have been issued to them, radio communications.
As I understand it from this concerned citizen, the men and women that were involved in this operation were trying to find landlines to call each other or others, because some of them did not have their own cell phones because they had no way of communicating with each other. The officers we several years ago, even before I came into the legislature, there was a law that took away all the cell phones. And this concerned citizen was appalled that in this day and age that we're not providing them with the most efficient means of communication, being a smartphone or something, to be able to communicate with each other, rather than just hope that you can patch between north and south over the radio, and trying to make sure with 12 different locations that you're not all getting jumbled.
Besides the portable radios, they even have radios installed in the patrol cars that are able to, because they have a patching technique, from our main tactical communication center, can patch them via on that car installed a Motorola radio.
This citizen asked me if I thought maybe it might be more efficient if we provided our police officers with issued cell phones.
One thing that we always got to look at is the operational security of digital interceptors that can digitally intercept, cellular communications, and another, I think with the radio communications that we have in play right now, it suffices right now in terms of the interoperable communications capability. So. Yet there are some officers that are using their personal cell phones as extra backup communications, and there's always that risk too, as we.
Yeah, I mean, that person was mentioning that was being utilized, and was surprised. As long as we're talking, I'll talk to you offline, not on here about another issue. But, go ahead.
Wasn't it just earlier this year that GPD received a large grant, federal funds for communications upgrade?
Yeah, we're working with the interoperable communications working group with Will Castro, the BIT director, and we've been having our meetings and working together with the governor in terms of getting that Department of Interior to fund the modernization.
Oh, so you have not received the funds? Because what I thought I read in the paper was that money's in the hands and we just got to execute.
The funds are here, and we're in the process at this point of finalizing the RFP or RFI.
Yeah.
So the working group or working committee, the interoperable working committee, are trying to get the dollar amount and the different phases together in the bid proposal. So we're going to resubmit it to DOI, showing that these are the changes from the initial proposal that was submitted, to include a total, I believe it's going to be a total of 12 million. So we're trying to break down that 12 million, because The first phase is just to get a scope of work of trying to get a vendor to come out and do consulting services. That's the first phase. We don't know how much it's going to cost for that individual, but it was being discussed that it's going to be a total of 12 million. Right now, we're only given 2.5.
How long has this effort been going on?
2 years.
This is, about close to,
About
2 years?
2 years.
About 2 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was it you? Was it you or me? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just heard something that I really liked. When you said that you could review the budget, the 35 million total, and maybe prioritize something other than what's in the budget, like a evidence room. Is that the route we're going to go? And if so, what would you prioritize?
Don't forget, 94% of your budget is tied up in personnel, so you don't have much wiggle room.
Yeah. So you got 31 million, 7 and change tied up in personnel. So where would you, if you could?
Well, we always want to make payroll, so we want to make sure all our personnel salaries
Okay.
and wages and all their pay is taken care of. The priority is make sure that the personnel we have on board, that
Yeah.
we make payroll. But as we look at the capital, improvement projects and those expenses, when it comes down to the forensic division and the challenges that has been raised with making sure all evidence is accountable, because we're not going to be an efficient police force if we lose our cases because the evidence have been compromised. A critical piece is that evidence control facility project, and having a challenging forensic division working together with them to identify within our police services funds as we go through this project with moving on modernizing the radio communications, but finding maybe in that cost sharing among the other agencies, which is still a discussion among the public safety agencies, that we use whatever monies we save from that and allocate it toward the evidence control facility section within this budget.
So would you say the evidence control facility would be a top priority to
Yes.
to relocate?
Yes, to relocate.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, has moving to the ITC building made operations much more efficient?
I think there's just been some positive communications I've had in terms of the staff, my command staff that has administrative division, that they're in a better place from where the old headquarters is at. We moved out of the way, and with where they're at, they're actually closer to the Attorney General's office, where they, and DOA, Department of Administration, where a little bit of the coordination can happen. So in that aspect, I have to answer yes. It's improved a little bit in terms of where they're at ITC.
So if that's happening, I know there was ongoing plans for a new central headquarters right in Manila. Is that still ongoing?
For the central precinct, for a new central precinct is another improvement project. We've had one that was HUD funded from Agate Precinct in the northern, and certainly I spoke to Lieutenant Donald Flickinger a few days ago, and he's assured me he's still continuing that dialogue with Gura in terms of looking at getting a brand new central precinct.
Okay. Chief, I know there's always going to be some shortage in manpower, personnel, officers on the street. And I'm always wondering if you're looking at innovation or things that are out there that we can model. And I know it's always going to be a cost as well, but in the lines of efficiency and covering areas that officers can't get to. I know what we're doing with the school systems is we're placing security cameras everywhere to deter crime, to deter vandalism. Are you guys exploring that type of innovation or somewhere where officers or from Central, wherever, could be monitoring this area from the comfort of the office and deploy personnel in areas that are isolated. Because I know we can't have cameras everywhere, but I know we need to at least explore some innovation to assist with the shortage of officers or augment and at least deter crime. I think people, if they know there's cameras in their neighborhood, at least they'll have some comfort if there's no officers patrolling there every hour. Are you exploring plans for that in the future that we can get to there somewhere?
As we've been conducting some of these spear operations in the villages, one day out of the week we've been meeting with the mayors, and I actually have a planned meeting with the municipal council, because when we develop these neighborhood watch programs, we need buy-in from the mayors. There have been successful neighborhood watch programs like Barragata and I believe Chalampago, but one of the things too, because you had mentioned school resource officers, which is funded, by it's a grant that the court probation officers, and they're actually working the schools. And one of the things, of course, is we want to make sure our children are safe, and taking a look at school resource officers. Because traditionally, if you look at other police departments in the states, they have what they call cops in school grants. And I've actually met with some of the school resource officers to engage them and find out, again, recruiting them to say, would you, a lot of them have their bachelor's degree in criminal justice, would you ever be interested in becoming a reserve officer at GPD, and us cross-training them? They're a court probation officer, but if they assume another role as a civilian police reserve officer, then when they switch to another uniform, that's our outreach into the schools. And then with technology-wise, I've been having discussions with the Homeland Security Advisor, because how the Port Authority, will capitalize on some, surveillance cameras as part of additional security, like Hotel Russian Association, how we have a camera system down there. We may work to see how we can expand this with mayors and looking at some of the fundings they have, and seeing whether it could be matched up with Homeland Security to have particular strategic cameras in the village areas or in main primary intersections, of areas or some critical areas, like again in the capital or up there in the northern villages where the heavy population is at center.
Right. I hope we can get there soon, Chief, because we know there is a shortage, but I think there is comfort knowing that my neighborhood is being watched by some officer or some public official that is, if I don't have an officer in my area, and I think that would, I just came from a place, I asked, why is there no officers out here? Well, of course they have the resources to do it, but they have a camera every 100 feet. But I know we can't get there tomorrow, but I'm saying we have to have some sort of plan in place that would, these isolated areas where, technology today can cover a large span of ground, monitoring it 24/7. And I think that would bring a lot of comfort to our people and of course deter crime, knowing that, you can't do anything, you're being watched, and I hope we can get there. And, if you can keep us posted on how we can help facilitate those plans, I sure like to be in discussions like that. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chief.
I'm exhausted. Oh, you got the number for the executive cars.
No, you wanted to know the description of the vehicle. There's 2 Lincoln Navigators and 1 Ford Expedition.
And how much?
And the good senator was good enough to say it was $17,000 a month for all 3. Yes.
A month?
Yes. If it's on lease, if anything should happen to the vehicle, we just turn it in, they do what they do. But we cover the fuel.
Yes.
Covered, yes. Because it's a lease agreement, so if anything should happen to the vehicle, we just turn it into them. They give us a loaner until if it's fixed, otherwise they'll...
I'll make a deal with you. I'll lease you my car for half. Who was the certifying officer for that lease? That certified funds are available and it was something to proceed with?
I'm the certifying officer for the Guam Police Department.
Okay.
there, Senator.
So just for the record, you certified that spending $200,000 on 3 cars, which was 50% of the supplies budget, was a good contractual expense for the department.
Well, I think, I separate that this is, of course, a cost, but at the same time, the function of these vehicles are for executive security as part of the governor, and also for any VIP that the governor has on island when he circulates around the island and going to functions.
Are those cars bulletproof?
No.
No,
Is
they're
there
not
anything
bulletproof.
special
They're not-
about them that validates them being $5,666 each a month?
It went out for bid. So
It went
that's-
out for bid.
That's what we got.
We put out a bid
I
to
know,
lease
Senator.
a car,
I know, Senator. It's
and
reliable.
the lowest bid that came in for the car.
Senator, the last thing we need is for the governor or the lieutenant governor's vehicles to break down. And
I'm sure we can rush a police car to pick him up. Seriously, we put that out for bid, and that was the lowest bid that came out for a lease. I'm amazed. I can't believe that.
That's what we got. We have to follow the standard lease specifications, and we got those from DPW. Turn it into to the GSA. Goes out for bid. So.
And Senator, a former
But you do
governor
know that
said
you
it's
can-
his office too. A former governor once said that the governor's vehicle is also
I'm
like
not a
an
governor.
office,
I'm
too.
just a senator. And so you guys also have the authority to reject a bid in the best interest of the territory. You do, Chief. So $17,000 a month for 3 cars. With the state of the police department and what's needed, I think we really need to start reconsidering. When does that lease expire?
June of next year.
Okay. Put that on. That's just a car.
If we were to do a comparison, look at previous administrations, executive security cars, not previous administration, but 20 years ago, another governor's expense on official vehicles, they used that up there in Government House. I don't know whether it might have been a different figure or a same type of cost.
Which governor was that?
Gutierrez, Governor Gutierrez?
Governor Gutierrez. Oh, you had to throw that in.
Even if no matter what governor it is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any of it right. And if we want to go and if we want to elevate it to a discussion of politics, Chief, that's way above and beyond the point that we're trying to make here. We're talking about the expenses of the police department.
Of course.
And I hope that this entire budget proceeding hasn't been about politics.
Of course.
It's now hit rock bottom. Thank you. It's adjourned.
Thank you.